Thanks, Nick. Really excited to be here speaking with you guys. So I'm the practical, actionable frameworks guy, and I promise I'll give you one on the back end of the talk. But as we mentioned here, wanted to give you a kind of a skeptic's look at AI and procurement, right? So we've heard about all the great things it's going to do for us over the course of the conference, but let's play devil's advocate here, right? So before we get into the frameworks and how to actually take action on this, I want to pose one simple but rhetorical question. Who needs artificial intelligence to succeed, right? So I always think that incentive structures are very, very powerful and always worth looking at when you're thinking about how you're going to address a problem and understanding a problem before doing that. And so answering this question together, I think, is going to give you lots of clarity on how to go forward. But first, let's define terms, right? So we've seen this definition in a couple different forms this week, or these last 2 days, and I was happy to see it. Artificial intelligence for me is a computer system that performs tasks that simulate human intelligence, right? So that's very important. I find that word, simulate, keep that in the back of your mind. And so we have a common definition from which to start. The other thing is AI is not new, right? It's about 80 years old, the different subfields of AI, and it's been an overnight success in the mainstream media since ChatGPT coming out and generative AI really hitting its stride in terms of capabilities. But the big change is that mainstream consciousness of AI, right? My grandma now knows what AI is, and that's pretty fantastic because it means my stakeholders know what AI is in the business, right? And so it's been around for years, and then the last piece is you've also been using AI for years, right? So there's dozens of AI subdomains, whether it's robotic process automation, natural language processing, predictive analytics. These are things that are embedded into your businesses already. The thing, when we say AI, it's kind of losing all meaning because it means everything and nothing these days. And what is usually meant by AI when you hear it in the mainstream media is large language models, right? These general purpose, Copilot, Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT models that are in and of themselves calling the other AI subdomains in the background, right? So an example is computer vision, where I have invoices and I'm using computer vision to scan those invoices and extract the data from an image, right? So that's its own subdomain. We can use that subdomain without using an LLM. And so the LLM is kind of like the orchestration layer, to use some language we're all familiar with now, to orchestrate these different subdomains of AI. But you can use those subdomains independently. And so if we take a look at these LLM players, what's happening in that market? So last year, ChatGPT was dominating with 80% of the market share. And the market is growing, of course, as we all know. But you can see that as of September of this year, ChatGPT's still growing from a overall user's perspective, but from a market share perspective, the AI war is becoming real, right? We see Gemini, DeepSeek, Grok taking market share slowly but surely. So there's an AI arms race, and ChatGPT is out front for now, but just like the internet era around 2000, we don't know how it's going to play out just yet, right? But why is this important for you as procurement professionals? Let's follow the money just to find out, right? So CapEx investments by AI providers or the hyperscalers, so we think about Google, Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, is $364 billion this year, right? To build out data centers. Just to give you a sense of what that means, because I feel like we're talking in gajillion dollar terms right now and it's lost all meaning, is that's approaching the entire GDP of South Africa, which is the 38th largest economy in the world. Amazon's spend alone on CapEx is the size of Ireland's economy, which is the 42nd largest economy in the world. It's 43% of the US defense budget, which is essentially the biggest spend line item in the world, and equivalent to 15 years worth of NASA's budget, right? So these are huge amounts of money to be spending on the CapEx build out of data centers and AI. And it doesn't include OpenAI's commitments, which are around $1 trillion that they've taken in commitments over the last 6 to 12 months. So as a reasonable person, as I'm sure you all are as well, I'm beginning to ask myself, well, where's all that money going to come from, right? Because as we know, these ChatGPT, LLM technologies aren't necessarily profitable yet, and that's a lot of money, right? So these are absurd numbers by any standard, and I'm wondering how we could possibly be making these commitments. And so the assumptions that are allowing us to do that is the company valuations. And the company valuations, your average public SaaS company is 7 times revenue. And these AI companies that are private AI companies are anywhere from 25 to, 227 times revenue right now. And the assumptions behind those valuations is massive cost reductions over time, price increases as well. So this morning, I think Eloise Epstein was mentioning the $20 cost to get access to this technology. That's dirt cheap compared to what it actually costs to run these days. So I think we're in the golden age of having access to AI and being able to experiment with it. And that price is bound to increase over time. Yes, the cost will reduce, but I don't think, if you look at how much it costs to run one of these models, it's much more than what you're paying for it. Broad economic productivity gains, which that's no surprise. And then the other one that I have an issue with is enterprise adoption at scale. Because we all have on our teams this person who's stuck in the past, like has trouble using Excel, right? And we're going to get this person to use an AI agent and to understand how to interact with it. I have an issue with that, right? Like I think that's going to be much harder than we think. So these crazy valuations, the market is tolerating them for the time being. These are the public AI company valuations. So I showed you the private ones, the public ones. So these hyperscalers, they're driving around a third, if we look at the top 6, and if we include Tesla, I think it's over 33% of the S&P's value right now, right? So it's very top-heavy in terms of these companies. And they're also driving the returns. So 75% of the S&P's returns in the last couple of years are driven by these 7, 8 companies at the top of the index, right? So it's very AI heavy, which has started sparking fears of an AI bubble, right, from an investment standpoint, except for Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs says everything is fine. And I started talking about this in February on the bottom left-hand corner on the newsletter, where I was going, are we in a bubble, and what does it mean for you as a procurement pro if we are in a bubble from a procurement of these technology perspective? But the caveat to that, adoption is also well on its way, right? So when we compare it to the internet, this is just ChatGPT, but I think it's safe to assume that it's the same proportion for the other LLMs. It took under 3 years for us to get to 800 million active users for ChatGPT, whereas it took 13 years for the internet. However, you can see that that's uneven by geography, right? So we're in the US today, whereas US 23%, right? And you see what I find striking is like the shared services of the world, right? So India, Morocco, et cetera, they have the biggest share of adoption. So your shared services are probably getting more profitable. The GPOs that you're using have a higher margin for the time being, given this additional usage. What I find scary on a personal basis is that Canada's not even on the list. And so I'm going to have some work to do over there. But that's kind of the picture I wanted to give you before getting into the frameworks, right? So in short, there's a crazy amount of money being spent on Gen AI and LLM build out from a CapEx perspective. It's not profitable for the foreseeable future. So something needs to budge, either the cost or the cost to run or the cost to you as a user. Because right now, everybody's bleeding money in terms of Gen AI. They're just trying to get your habits and trying to get you as a user to adopt that, because then hopefully create some lock-in. And while adoption rates are going up quickly, the valuation levels, as we just saw, are a bit delusional. And so the AI buzz is starting to look like an AI bubble. And so why should you care, right? Why should you care about that? We're not here to give you investment advice, but more how to drive your business decisions based on this information. So what does it mean for you? It means you need to zoom out a little bit, right? So if we look at the electric grid build-out or the railroad build-out or even the internet build-out, these are all infrastructure build-outs that ended up being bubbles in their own time. And so that did not mean that you had to essentially change your behavior at that point in time, because we still had exponential progress come about from those technologies, right? And so this AI bubble, at least in my personal opinion, will eventually pop. Is it going to be smooth pop or a big pop? Who knows, right? You know as much as I do. But there's a couple lessons to be taken here from these other infrastructure build-outs. And to me, that lesson is those who adopt AI quickly won't necessarily win, but those who adopt it systematically and purposefully, they will absolutely win, because over time, we're going to keep going on that curve, right? And so you want to just get on that curve as fast as possible in a purposeful and meaningful way. So what does that mean? It means we should start learning and experimenting and hedging our bets, but we should absolutely be betting, right? We should be at the table playing. And that's where, in the second part of the talk, I want to give you a framework to help you do that. So we've heard a lot about upskilling in the previous panel and throughout the weekend, right? So I agree that the number one thing you need to do as a procurement organization is develop your digital literacy, right? So what does that mean? It means that comfortable humans do not want to change, learn new stuff if they don't have to. And so it's engineering that uncomfort with your teams so that we are growing and adopting a digital-first mindset and an automation-first mindset. Number two, once you've done that, you can identify pain points. We've talked a lot about pain driving, and the reason is that pain sells much more than potential benefit does from a psychological perspective. And so that's how you would identify your opportunities, drive your roadmap, right, is on getting rid of that pain. Third, IT needs to become your best friend, and you, to some extent, need to become IT, right? So if you have an IT business partner today, if they're not your best friend, if you don't have a weekly cadence meeting with your IT business partner, you need to put one in the books and start driving the conversation so that there's a touch point every single week, and getting them to understand what procurement is to you and understanding what the IT strategy of the business is for you as well. Number three, once you've done that and you have a common vision with IT, because we've talked about the push and the pull of like build versus buy. We've talked about the push and the pull of, are we using an enterprise-wide platform for AI? Can we do best of breed technologies in procurement, right? So getting on the same page about those big orientations with IT. Once you've done that, then you could bring partners into the fold, whether they be consulting partners, whether they be software partners that have the skills to build AI agents, like we've seen with the AI workshops here at Zip Forward. And you validate their references, right? Make sure that they're not just technologists, they're also business people. They're bringing a complete team to help you. And then it's piloting small, which we've heard from the panel beforehand too. And I like this concept of the minimum viable scope, right? What is the minimum viable scope that I can put in place in a project to demonstrate that this can be successful at scale, right? Because the bigger the project, the more variables there are, the more risk there is, right? And it seems very, it's very tempting to do a big project, right? Because it's kind of like plastic surgery, where we're ugly, we're going to go get the surgery, we're going to be beautiful at the end, right? But that's not how digital transformation works, unfortunately. And then the sixth step is to deploy and iterate, right? So that's why it's a cycle here, is that you're going to learn stuff by doing. You're not going to learn stuff by just passively learning. You're going to learn by trying to build agents, getting it wrong, but making sure that you're building in a way where if you get it wrong, it's not the end of the world, right? And then iterating on that until you have the organizational competence, confidence, and digital literacy to get the results that you're seeking. So let's do that first step together. If this would, yep. So let's do the first step together. Here's the top 10 most relevant AI subdomains, at least as I see them, for procurement, right? So we have large language models. No surprise, I've been talking about those. But there's machine learning, natural language processing, anomaly detection. These are all things that when we talk about digital literacy, and I'm kind of selling the punch here, is something that you can research with your team, right? Is something that you can ask your team to research on and to present on. And that's one of the beautiful things with AI, is that AI can teach you AI, right? You can sit down with it and get all the information that you need to learn something and then to put it into practice. So I'll give you the top 10 with the deck, but let's illustrate with how we could tangibly, practically do this in your teams with LLMs and with computer vision. The first thing to know is that every AI subdomain has both strengths and weaknesses, right? So there's no panacea, there's nothing that's going to solve your problem, but there are certain subdomains that are better suited for different types of work or different types of problems that you're trying to solve. And so the best thing you can do as a procurement professional is not become a technologist. I did allude to the fact that you do need to develop some IT skills, but that to me is more around version management of business processes, architecture, governance, those types of things. But you're not going to become an AI expert, right, or an IT expert, and you shouldn't have to. But what you can do is know enough about the subject to have a good BS detector, right? And if you have a good BS detector, then when you're working with vendors or when you're working with consultants or with IT, you're going to have a sense of, does this have a potential to work or not? And so that's where this sheet comes in, right? So as you should have a cadence with IT every week, and maybe they can even participate in this, you could have your team assign these 10 domains, there are more as well, right? And say, okay, you're pairing off or you're alone, right? What does this subdomain do? What are the strengths and weaknesses of that subdomain? What are the good procurement use cases that we could leverage that subdomain for in our business? And then what's the bottom line, right? What's the key takeaway around this subdomain? So I've done two with you, as I said, LLM and computer vision. LLM, I see it as the most sophisticated next word guesser in the world. So it's the great draft machine, right? Because if I simplify it down to its most simple expression, but I think it's useful, it's a statistical model that guesses the next most likeliest word in a sentence based on context. And so what does that mean? Well, it means it's very good at generating human quality text, but it can generate plausible but incorrect information, right? You've heard hallucinations be referred to throughout the conference, and that's a real thing. Especially, like, you could give it the same inputs 2 times in a row and have different outputs, right, for the exact same question. And so this is good for tasks where that doesn't really matter, right? So an RFP draft generation for contract analysis and getting the key takeaways, right? Communications to suppliers, it's not the end of the world if it's not the same boilerplate email every time or same communication, as long as it fits the context. Policy guidance, right? Polling a policy and getting answers about policies. So the key takeaway here is that if you're still having humans draft big documents, right, you're losing a bunch of time and money doing that in a procurement context. But if you're asking Gen AI to do deterministic work, so deterministic work is we know there's a given answer that is, it's always the same answer in this specific circumstance, or there's a formula, then it's not the right tool and you're creating a time bomb for yourself, right? And so just knowing that when you're looking at solutions or when you're trying to build an agent, right, you're not going to be tempted to use access to an LLM if the task or the problem you're trying to solve doesn't fit. One example, oops. Right? I thought you probably saw this in the news the last couple of weeks. Deloitte was caught using Gen AI in a report because there was a bunch of made-up facts in the report for the Australian government, and then they had to, rework it, of course. And I haven't followed the story since, but I thought that was really illustrative of what I just mentioned. Second example, computer vision. So computer vision to me is the AI subdomains that turns images into data. Right? And so if that's what I need, I want to process visual information faster and much more consistently than a human. I want to detect subtle patterns and anomalies that humans may miss as they get tired, right, or have different skill levels in a given team. But on the flip side, the disadvantages or the weaknesses of this subdomain is that it's sensitive to lighting, to angles, to image quality changes, right? So if you don't have a very standard image type, you'll have variable results. And you also have very big training data biases, right? So the only way this works is, and the example I love the most to illustrate is like X-rays, right? You go get an X-ray, everybody's got the same body bones, right? And then your doctor puts it up to the light and he looks at it and I think you have a broken bone, right? And so there's a process behind analyzing an X-ray and capturing the data from that X-ray to target the fact that there's a broken bone. Humans can miss it based on skill level, based on how tired they are. But with AI, if I've got a corpus of X-rays of broken bones or broken femurs, right, I'm able to reference that to say this is a broken femur just by mapping that image against all the data points I have in my corpus. But if I use a corpus where there's bias built in, right, like I don't have any femurs at all, it's all just broken feet, right, it might tell me it's a broken foot even though it's a broken femur, right? And so that's a weakness based on the training data you're using for computer vision. But from a procurement standpoint, what's the type of stuff that we have high volume that always has the same information in it, that looks the same? Invoice processing is a good example. Receiving, right? If you're receiving the same types of widgets for raw materials over and over and over again, quality inspection, right? You're always looking at the same things. You have a high level of data that you can run against to validate. Those are interesting use cases, right, in your context. And so, yeah, if you're trying the bottom line with this one is if you're trying to process very large amounts of data over and over and over again that are very similar to what you've done in the past, then you're leaving a lot of money on the table not using computer vision, right? But if you're going to use something on a very small, unique data set and you want to turn that into data, then don't use computer vision to do that, right? And so you see the bottom line for that specific subdomain. And so what I invite you to do is, or before that, another fail here, right? So another example that illustrates what I just mentioned. Amazon has facial recognition software that leverages computer vision, and they misidentified or matched US Congress people to criminal mugshots, right? So, and the two examples I gave you are Deloitte and Amazon, right? So these people are experimenting with these technologies, right? And they're not afraid to make mistakes. Maybe they should be a little bit more, right? But I think that's the lesson here as well, is we need to be in an experimentation mindset. And so what I invite you to do is to do the other 8 with your team. And if there's momentum there, keep going, right? There's 20, there's probably even more than that, but just getting a sense, that's what digital literacy is, right? It's knowing, what can I do with my toolbox? What is my toolbox? What are the tools in there? And so you can use AI to learn about AI, as I mentioned, right? I see this as a weekly meeting with folks who have an interest at first, and then maybe it's mandatory at the end for everybody to participate, right? And then how do we apply it to our business, to the problems that we're facing? And maybe that means using Power Automate and the Microsoft suite as a proof of concept, because that's the only thing we have access to right now. And we want to do that to build the case, right? Demonstrate the proof of concept that we could get a fit for purpose tool, such as a Zip or something else, depending on your use case, to show value for the organization, right? And what that'll do is it'll train your BS detector collectively as a team, and you'll be an agent of change, of course, to tie it into the conference theme here. And so that's all well and good, having that cadence, but I think one of the things that's really important, right, is I mentioned the public or plastic surgery, not public surgery. My God, no, let's not do that. Plastic surgery example for transformation, and we've treated it that way for far too long, right? So I don't know what the latest stats are, but it's always, when we talk about digital transformation failure in projects and in organizations, it's always between like 60 and 90%, right? So I always kind of say around 80%. So one in 5 projects transformation-wise succeeds. And so how do we get out of that cycle, right? And so to me, it's less plastic surgery and more like going to the gym, right? So it means we need to develop an organizational habit around learning, around iterating, experimenting. And I love the digital procurement garage concept for this, right? So there's what we just discussed at the team level, but then there's also how at the organizational level can I change the culture, affect the culture to get into this iterative mindset? So it's really thinking of switching from projects to products, switching from CapEx to OpEx, trying to get budget for innovation, experimentation, on an ongoing basis. From assumptions, God, I hate assumptions, right? You got this big project, you got an Excel file with like 250 assumptions that all need to be true for you to have a successful project. That means it's gonna fail, right? And so how do we treat those assumptions not as assumptions, but as hypotheses that we need to test in a very small controlled environment and that we can infirm or confirm and then move on based on that information, right? Instead of selecting technology one time, how do we explore technology continuously with small bets and then bet big on the things that make sense? And finally, from success failure, right? And that's a big thing in organizational culture as well. Like, how do we get away from, we failed on this to we're actually learning. We're learning something. We have lessons learned, we have key takeaways, and that's important. And once you're able to do that, and I apologize here for the formatting, you're able to talk about agentic AI or AI agents, right? Because what is AI agents? The key word is agency. It's giving agency to a system to take decisions within a guardrail, execute a business process, and switch that business process over time. And you can automate, yes, tedious work with this, but you can also, you can only automate work that you intimately understand, right? And so I think the process I'm proposing is to get intimate with your work and your team with their work, and then the tools to be able to automate that work with agents further on. And the agentic way, right, is really when we think about the old way, like robotic process automation, it's I need to know every single step in the workflow, and I need to be able to automate it once I know that, and then that's a huge barrier to entry to automation. The new way is more objective-based, but I still need to know my objective, my strategy, where I want to go, and set the parameters, but I don't need to map out the process as rigidly as previous iterations of technology. And when you're thinking through, okay, we've done the work, we know where we want to go, how should we think about the different types of work, and what do we give 100% to AI, and what do we keep a human in the loop for? This is one of the matrices I propose, right? So how much risk is associated to the task? And then what kind of work is it? Is it deterministic, where we have a given answer, there's an algorithm that we can always get the same answer for? Or is it non-deterministic, which means there's creativity, judgment is involved? And then you'll be able to start off here, but in here with a certain degree of human in the loop, right? To kind of babysit the process along the way and tweak it and change it and kind of bring things down into deterministic, or I should say left into deterministic work, right? Because you'll uncover the business rules that you can use on non-deterministic work to turn it into deterministic work. And then there's a question of impact. Where does the impact go? It doesn't mean that because it's low risk and deterministic, that's not where you need to start. You just need to start where there's the highest impact and then appropriately put a human in the loop or check what AI is doing along the way based on the correct subdomains that you're using. And so in closing, because I know I'm already over time here, the key takeaways is stop watching the news, right? Like AI is not gonna steal everybody's job tomorrow, right? There's all this adoption that needs to happen that's ongoing much faster than it was for previous generational tech changes. But you need to start researching, learning, putting your ante in the game, and then when you find something, a hand you like, going all in at that point in time, right? And so you need to have an experimentation culture and hopefully influence the organization to adopt that culture as well so that you can become an agent of change. So thank you very much. Why should you listen? Should you have listened to me? So I've been doing these types of projects in ProcureTech for 15 some odd years. And I try to publish stuff like this on a weekly basis for procurement professionals who want to increase their digital literacy. So if you'd like to keep the conversation going, I'm more than happy to have you as a newsletter reader. Comes out every Sunday night. So thanks so much, everybody.